Do not let Mr. Sterling drink the champagne! Maya Williams' voice cut through the ballroom like shattered glass. Hundreds of conversations died instantly. Crystal chandeliers poured warm gold light across the marble floor. A violin quartet stopped mid-note. 500 guests turned at once. At the center of the room, billionaire Jonathan Sterling stood beside a towering champagne fountain, his hand already wrapped around a crystal flute. For one frozen second, nobody moved. Then the laughter started. "The maid has lost her mind," someone muttered. Maya's chest rose and fell sharply. She could feel every eye in the room drilling into her dark skin, her plain black uniform, the housekeeping badge clipped to her collar. Jonathan's jaw tightened. His blue eyes locked onto her. Cold. Sharp. Dangerous. "Security," he said quietly. The word landed heavier than a shout. 2 guards immediately stepped forward. Maya swallowed hard. The ballroom suddenly felt smaller. Hotter. The scent of expensive perfume mixed with the metallic taste of fear in her mouth. "Sir," she said, "you cannot drink that." A few guests exchanged amused glances. One executive chuckled. "Since when do maids give security briefings?" More laughter followed. Jonathan never looked away from her. "You interrupted my gala for this?" Maya's fingers trembled. Not from fear. From certainty. 20 minutes earlier she had been alone in the east hallway replacing towels outside the private conference suites. The corridor had been nearly empty. Soft yellow lights glowed against polished walnut walls. The distant hum of elevators echoed through the silence. Then she heard Russian. Maya froze. The language hit her ears instantly. Her father had spent years teaching her before he died. Most people would have walked away. Maya had not. 2 voices drifted from a partially opened service door. Calm. Precise. Dangerous. She remembered every word. Especially the sentence that made the blood drain from her face. "Once Sterling drinks, everything ends tonight." Maya had stood motionless. The folded towels nearly slipped from her hands. She thought she had misunderstood. Then she heard Jonathan Sterling's name again. And again. When she finally reported it, nobody listened. The head of security barely looked up from his tablet. "Go clean something." The event manager rolled her eyes. "You heard foreign guests talking. Congratulations." Another supervisor actually laughed. "Maybe stick to housekeeping." Humiliation burned hotter than anger. Yet the words would not leave her head. Everything ends tonight. Back in the ballroom, Jonathan slowly lifted the champagne flute from the silver tray. The crowd relaxed. Smirks appeared. The moment was over. The maid would be escorted out. Order would return. Maya's pulse hammered in her ears. Something felt wrong. Terribly wrong. Then she noticed a man near the back exit. Gray suit. Silver tie. Watching. Not drinking. Not talking. Just watching Jonathan. The man's hand moved toward his jacket pocket. Maya's stomach dropped. "Sir!" she shouted again. "Please!" The room exploded with irritation. Jonathan's expression hardened. "You are finished here." One guard grabbed Maya's arm. Another reached for her badge. Guests began turning away. The orchestra prepared to resume. Jonathan raised the glass higher. The golden liquid caught the chandelier light like liquid fire. Maya looked toward the man in the gray suit. He was smiling now. Calm. Expectant. As if he already knew what was about to happen. And then, just before Jonathan brought the glass to his lips, Maya saw something inside the crystal flute that nobody else had noticed. The tiny speck drifted through the champagne like a sliver of silver dust. Maya's breath caught. It was there 1 second, gone the next as the liquid swirled beneath the ballroom lights. "Stop!" she cried. The guard tightened his grip on her arm. Jonathan Sterling barely glanced at the glass. "Enough." His voice was ice. Around them, guests shifted impatiently. Crystal clinked. Expensive shoes scraped across polished marble. Every second made Maya feel smaller, more invisible. Just a maid. Just another voice nobody wanted to hear. But then the man in the gray suit started moving. Not toward Jonathan. Toward the exit. Fast. Maya saw it instantly. Her pulse exploded. "The man by the door!" she shouted. Several heads turned. The stranger froze for a fraction of a second before continuing. Calm. Controlled. Too controlled. Jonathan noticed it too. His eyes narrowed. The room seemed to hold its breath. Then his chief of security stepped forward. "Sir, should we stop him?" Jonathan hesitated. 1 beat. 2. The stranger disappeared through the doorway. Maya felt panic surge through her chest. Whatever was happening was slipping away. The billionaire lowered the glass slightly. For the first time, uncertainty crossed his face. The orchestra remained silent. 500 people watched. Waiting. Judging. "You interrupted my event because of a speck in a drink?" Jonathan asked. Maya swallowed. Every eye in the room felt like heat against her skin. "No, sir." Her voice trembled. "Because of what I heard." Laughter rippled through a section of the crowd. One investor shook his head. "This is ridiculous." Another guest smirked. "She wants attention." The humiliation landed hard. Maya felt it. Every word. Every stare. Yet she could still hear the Russian voices from the hallway. Calm. Certain. Deadly. Once Sterling drinks, everything ends tonight. Jonathan studied her face. Something about her expression stopped him. She was scared. Not for herself. For him. That realization unsettled him more than he expected. Then a voice suddenly echoed from the back of the ballroom. "Sir?" Everyone turned. A young security analyst stood near a service entrance, holding a tablet. His face had gone pale. "We have a problem." The room instantly tightened again. Jonathan stepped forward. "What kind of problem?" The analyst hesitated. "The east hallway cameras." "What about them?" "They were disabled 23 minutes ago." A murmur swept through the crowd. Jonathan's jaw clenched. Maya's stomach dropped. 23 minutes. Exactly when she had overheard the conversation. The analyst swallowed. "And there is more." The ballroom fell completely silent. Even the air conditioning seemed louder now. "A private service elevator was used during the outage." Jonathan stared. "By whom?" The analyst looked down at the screen. "We do not know. The footage is gone." Suddenly nobody was laughing anymore. Maya felt dozens of eyes shift back toward her. The same people who had mocked her moments ago now looked uncertain. Nervous. Jonathan slowly lowered the champagne glass. The confidence that had filled the room minutes earlier was evaporating. Then the billionaire looked directly at Maya. Really looked at her for the first time all night. "What exactly did you hear?" he asked quietly. Maya opened her mouth. The answer had lived inside her head for 20 minutes. But before she could speak, a sharp electronic alarm suddenly erupted from somewhere deep inside the hotel. Heads snapped toward the ceiling. Red lights flashed once. Then again. The analyst's face strained of all color as he stared at his tablet. "Sir?" he whispered. "Someone just accessed your private penthouse suite." The alarm kept screaming through the ballroom. Sharp. Relentless. Red emergency lights washed across crystal glasses and polished silver trays, turning the elegant room into something colder. Something wrong. Jonathan Sterling did not move. His eyes stayed locked on the security analyst. "My penthouse?" he asked. The analyst nodded once. "Someone bypassed every access restriction." A ripple of panic spread through the crowd. Guests began pulling out phones. Tiny screens lit up across the ballroom like scattered stars. Whispers became conversations. Conversations became noise. Maya felt the atmosphere changing. The people who had laughed at her minutes earlier were suddenly afraid. Jonathan turned toward his security chief. "Lock the building down." The man immediately reached for his radio. Already happening, sir. Footsteps echoed across marble floors. Security teams rushed through side entrances. Earpieces crackled. Somewhere above them, elevators began moving. Fast. Maya's pulse hammered. Something did not fit. The Russian conversation. The disabled cameras. The man in the gray suit. The penthouse access. They were connected. She knew it. But nobody was asking the right question. Jonathan finally looked back at her. His expression was different now. Not trust. Not yet. But doubt had entered the room, and doubt was powerful. Tell me exactly what you heard. Maya inhaled slowly. Hundreds of eyes settled on her again. The black maid standing beneath $1 billion worth of chandeliers. The same woman they had mocked. The same woman nobody wanted to hear. Yet now she was the center of the room. There were two voices, she said. One man. One woman. Silence spread. Even the orchestra members sat frozen. The woman asked if everything was ready. The man said yes. Jonathan's jaw tightened. Maya continued. Then she asked what would happen after. The security chief stepped closer. And? Maya could still hear the Russian words perfectly. He said, once Sterling drinks, nobody will be looking at the penthouse. The room froze. Several guests exchanged stunned looks. Jonathan's eyes narrowed. What does that mean? Maya turned toward the ceiling. Toward the private residence 30 floors above them. Suddenly the answer felt obvious. The champagne was never the real target. The ballroom erupted. Conversations exploded from every corner. Security agents started speaking into radios simultaneously. Jonathan's face darkened. You are saying this was a distraction? I think so. The billionaire immediately turned. Get a team upstairs now. The security chief sprinted away. The tension in the room tightened another notch. Then came the shock nobody expected. The analyst stared at his tablet and visibly paled. Sir? Jonathan stopped. What now? The analyst swallowed hard. The penthouse access code was entered correctly. Silence. Jonathan stared at him. Correctly? Yes, sir. A long pause followed. The analyst looked sick. Whoever entered knew your private code. Maya felt a chill crawl down her spine. That changed everything. This was not an outsider. This was someone close. Someone trusted. Around the room, executives shifted uneasily. Jonathan slowly scanned the faces surrounding him. Advisors. Partners. Friends. Employees. For the first time all evening, suspicion entered his eyes. The room no longer felt safe. Then Maya noticed something else. A reflection in the mirrored wall beside the champagne tower. A woman standing near the back of the crowd. Blonde hair. White evening gown. Perfect posture. Watching. Not frightened. Not surprised. Watching. Their eyes met for half a second. The woman immediately turned and started walking away. Maya's heart skipped. She had seen her before. Not in the ballroom. Not at the gala. In the hallway. Near the service door where the Russian voices had come from. Wait, Maya whispered. Her eyes widened. The woman reached the exit. Sir? Maya said. Jonathan turned. What? Maya pointed toward the retreating figure. The woman disappeared through the doorway just as the elevator status screen above the ballroom entrance flashed a single line of text. Penthouse level accessed. And then Jonathan Sterling saw the name attached to the access authorization. The color drained from his face. The ballroom went dead silent. Jonathan Sterling stared at the access screen as if the letters had stopped making sense. Around him, hundreds of guests leaned forward. Phone cameras rose higher. Tiny recording lights blinked red throughout the crowd. Maya felt the pressure shift again. The danger was no longer somewhere above them. It was standing in the room. Sir? The analyst asked quietly. Jonathan did not answer. His face had turned pale beneath the chandelier light. Then he finally spoke. "Read it again." The analyst swallowed. "Penthouse access authorized by Olivia Sterling." A collective gasp rippled through the ballroom. Maya felt it like a wave. Olivia Sterling. Jonathan's wife. The woman who had been overseas for 3 days. The woman who supposedly was not even in New York. Whispers exploded immediately. Jonathan's jaw tightened so hard a muscle jumped near his temple. "That is impossible." His voice came out low and dangerous. The analyst looked terrified. "The system confirms it, sir." Jonathan snatched the tablet from his hands. His fingers gripped the metal edge so tightly his knuckles turned white. Maya watched his eyes move across the screen. Security timestamps. Access logs. Authentication records. Everything matched. The billionaire suddenly looked less like the most powerful man in the room and more like a man losing control of something he thought he owned. Near the back of the ballroom, guests exchanged uneasy looks. Investors whispered behind raised glasses. Reporters had begun arriving near the entrance. The story was spreading. Fast. Jonathan could feel it. His reputation. His company. His marriage. Everything suddenly stood on unstable ground. Then Maya spoke. "The woman in the white gown." Jonathan looked up sharply. "What about her?" "She was near the service hallway." Several security officers turned immediately. Maya pointed toward the exit where the blonde woman had disappeared. "I saw her before the gala started." Jonathan's eyes narrowed. "You are sure?" Maya nodded. "She was listening. Not talking. Listening." The room shifted again. Something about that detail landed differently. Jonathan stared at her for a long moment. The maid. The woman nobody respected. The woman who had noticed everything. Meanwhile, dozens of executives, consultants, and security professionals had missed it all. That realization made several faces in the room visibly uncomfortable. One senior executive stepped forward. "With respect, sir, we are taking conclusions from a housekeeper." Maya felt the humiliation instantly. The old dismissal. The same look. The same tone. Jonathan remained silent. The executive continued. "We need facts, not assumptions." Maya's cheeks burned. But before she could answer, a new voice cut through the room. "Actually, she may be right." Every head turned. The analyst was staring at another screen now. His hands trembled. "The woman in white was captured entering the east hallway 18 minutes before the camera outage." Silence crashed over the room. The executive immediately stopped talking. Maya saw several people look away. Others suddenly avoided eye contact altogether. For the first time all evening, nobody was laughing at her. Then another alert appeared on the analyst's screen. His expression changed instantly. Worse this time. Much worse. "Sir?" Jonathan stepped forward. "What now?" The analyst looked like he wanted to disappear. "There is activity in the penthouse." Jonathan's breathing slowed. "Dangerous." "Controlled." "What kind of activity?" The analyst hesitated. "Someone is downloading files from your private server." The ballroom erupted. Jonathan's entire empire lived inside those servers. Acquisitions, patents, financial records, contracts worth billions. Maya felt the tension become physical, like electricity crawling through the air. Then Jonathan suddenly turned toward her. The movement startled everyone. "You heard them speaking Russian?" Maya nodded. "Yes." "What else did they say?" The room became silent again. Maya closed her eyes. The hallway returned instantly. The warm lights. The distant elevator hum. The voices. And then she remembered something she had dismissed before. One sentence. One name. Her eyes opened. Jonathan saw the change immediately. "What is it?" Maya's throat tightened. "They mentioned someone." Jonathan took a step closer. "Who?" Maya looked directly at him. The answer hit her like ice. The name was not Olivia Sterling. The name was someone standing inside the ballroom right now. And at that exact moment, a phone began ringing in the crowd. One single ringtone. Loud. Sharp. Impossible to ignore. The owner froze as every person in the room slowly turned toward him. The ringtone echoed through the ballroom like a gunshot. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Hundreds of eyes locked onto a single man standing near the front row of investors. Richard Hale. Jonathan Sterling's chief financial officer. The phone trembled in his hand. The screen glowed against his pale face. For a second, the entire room seemed to tilt. Jonathan stared at him. Answer it. His voice was calm. Too calm. Richard did not move. The silence became unbearable. Camera phones rose higher. Reporters pushed closer. The red emergency lights continued flashing across crystal chandeliers and polished metal surfaces, painting the room in pulses of warning. Finally, Richard looked down at the screen. Then he did something nobody expected. He rejected the call. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Jonathan's eyes narrowed. Why would you do that? Richard forced a smile that fooled no one. Because this has become absurd. His voice cracked slightly. Maya noticed it immediately. The confidence was gone. The room noticed too. The investors exchanged uneasy glances. The illusion of control was cracking. Jonathan stepped closer. Who was calling you? Richard laughed once. A short, brittle sound. You are really listening to a maid now? The words hit Maya like a slap. Dozens of heads turned toward her again. She felt the weight instantly. The judgment. The dismissal. The humiliation. Yet something had changed. This time fewer people laughed. Because too many of her warnings had already come true. Richard pointed directly at her. She overhears half a conversation and suddenly everyone loses their minds? Jonathan remained silent. Maya could see it in his face. He wanted Richard to be innocent. Needed him to be innocent. Richard had worked beside him for 12 years. Built the company with him. Sat beside him during every crisis. Every acquisition. Every victory. The possibility that Maya was right threatened something deeper than money. It threatened trust. Then the analyst's tablet chimed again. Sharp. Loud. Terrible timing. The young man's face immediately drained of color. Jonathan looked at him. What now? The analyst swallowed hard. The file transfer from the penthouse just completed. The room erupted. Investors began talking all at once. Security officers reached for radios. Jonathan grabbed the tablet and scanned the screen. Maya watched his expression change. Confusion. Disbelief. Then something worse. Fear. No, he whispered. The word barely escaped. Richard stiffened. Jonathan slowly raised his eyes. The files weren't financial records. Silence crashed over the room. Maya felt her pulse spike. What files? Someone asked. Jonathan looked sick. Personal archives. The room became still again. Every camera remained pointed at him. Family records. Private correspondence. Medical documents. Legal agreements. Richard looked away. A tiny movement. Almost invisible. Maya caught it. Jonathan caught it too. Suddenly the billionaire looked less powerful than he had all night. The threat was no longer his company. It was his life. His family. His secrets. Then Maya remembered something else from the hallway conversation. A detail she had overlooked because it seemed unimportant. Until now. Her heart started racing. Sir? Jonathan turned immediately. He trusted her now. That realization shocked even her. What? Maya hesitated. The entire ballroom waited. The woman said one more thing? Richard's shoulders tightened. Jonathan noticed. So did everyone else. What did she say? Maya's throat felt dry. She said after tonight. Richard suddenly took a step backward. Security officers immediately reacted. The room exploded with tension. Maya never looked away from him. She said he must never discover the truth about his daughter. The words landed like thunder. Jonathan froze. Completely froze. Richard's face lost all color. Around them, hundreds of people stood motionless beneath the flashing red lights. Then Jonathan slowly turned toward Richard. Not as a CEO. Not as a billionaire. As a man whose world had just shattered. And before anyone could speak, another incoming message appeared on the giant security monitor. One photograph. One timestamp from the penthouse. One image captured less than 3 minutes ago. Maya looked up at the screen. Her breath stopped. The woman in the white gown was standing inside Jonathan's private office. And beside her stood someone nobody in the ballroom should have been able to see. No one spoke. The ballroom stood frozen beneath the pulsing red emergency lights as the photograph remained on the giant security screen. Hundreds of people stared upward. Nobody seemed willing to blink. Maya felt the silence pressing against her ears. The alarms had stopped. The shouting had stopped. Even the frantic radio chatter from security teams had faded into distant static. Only the soft hum of the building remained. Jonathan Sterling stared at the image. His face had become unreadable. The woman in white stood inside his private office. Beside her was a young woman. Maybe 20 years old. Dark hair. Pale blue coat. Her face partially turned away from the camera. The timestamp blinked beneath the photograph. 3 minutes ago. Richard Hales slowly lowered his eyes. The movement did not escape Maya. Neither did the guilt. Jonathan noticed it too. For the first time all evening, the billionaire looked tired. Not angry. Not powerful. Tired. Like a man standing in front of a truth he had spent years refusing to see. Around the room, investors shifted uneasily. The confidence was gone. The certainty was gone. All that remained was anticipation. Maya stood perfectly still. The same people who had laughed at her now watched her differently. Security officers. Executives. Reporters. Even Jonathan. Nobody interrupted when she spoke anymore. Nobody rolled their eyes. The change felt almost surreal. "Who is she?" Jonathan asked quietly. The analyst zoomed into the image. The room leaned forward collectively. Pixels sharpened. Faces became clearer. Then a faint sound escaped Jonathan's lips. Not a word. More like a breath being knocked out of him. Maya looked toward him. His eyes were fixed on the screen. Unmoving. "Sir?" the analyst asked carefully. Jonathan never answered. Maya followed his gaze. The young woman. Something about her face. The shape of her eyes. The line of her jaw. The room seemed to shrink. Then Maya saw it too. The resemblance. Not identical. But enough. Enough to make her pulse quicken. Enough to explain Jonathan's reaction. Several guests noticed at the same moment. Whispers spread through the ballroom like a cold wind. Jonathan stepped closer to the screen. His polished shoes echoed against marble. Slow. Measured. Unsteady. "That is impossible," he whispered. Richard closed his eyes. Just for a second. Maya saw it. The tiniest crack in a man who had spent years controlling every detail around him. Jonathan turned. "You know who she is." Richard said nothing. The silence answered for him. Cameras immediately shifted toward the CFO. Tiny recording lights blinked red across the room. The pressure became unbearable. Yet Maya sensed something deeper. Something nobody else had noticed. She looked back at the photograph. The young woman was not looking at the files. Not looking at the office. She was looking directly toward the camera. Toward whoever might discover the image later. Maya's stomach tightened. That was not the expression of someone stealing secrets. It was the expression of someone trying to send a message. Jonathan finally spoke again. His voice was barely audible. "Why now?" No one answered. The question hung in the air. Then a vibration broke the silence. Soft. Sharp. Unexpected. Everyone turned. It came from Jonathan's jacket pocket. His phone. The billionaire stared at it without moving. One vibration. Then another. The screen illuminated his face with a pale glow. Unknown number. The room watched him. He answered. Slowly. Carefully. This is Jonathan Sterling. Silence followed. Long silence. Then everyone saw the color drain from his face. Maya could not hear the voice on the other end. Nobody could. Yet something about Jonathan's expression made the entire ballroom stop breathing. His hand tightened around the phone. Where are you? He asked. More silence. Jonathan's eyes slowly lifted toward the giant photograph still displayed on the screen. The young woman seemed to stare back at him. Then he whispered a single word that sent a visible shock through the room. Emily? Across the ballroom, Richard Hale nearly collapsed into a chair. And on the security monitor, a second image suddenly appeared automatically from the penthouse cameras. This time the woman in white was gone. The office was empty. Except for a handwritten note placed neatly in the center of Jonathan Sterling's desk. The note sat alone in the center of Jonathan Sterling's desk. No alarms. No flashing lights. Just a single sheet of white paper beneath the cold glow of the office lamps. The ballroom stared at the screen. Nobody spoke. Jonathan lowered the phone from his ear with trembling fingers. His face had changed completely. The billionaire who controlled boardrooms, markets, and governments now looked like a father struggling to breathe. Emily, he whispered again. Across the room, Richard Hale covered his mouth. His eyes glistened beneath the chandelier light. Maya noticed immediately. That was not the face of a man protecting stolen money. That was the face of a man carrying guilt for years. The room felt smaller. Heavier. The giant monitor zoomed closer to the note. Security software sharpened the image. A handwritten message slowly became readable. Hundreds of guests leaned forward. Camera phones remained frozen in the air. The silence was unbearable. Jonathan stared at the words. Then his knees nearly gave out. A security officer instinctively stepped toward him. He waved him away. Sir? Nobody answered. Jonathan kept reading. Maya watched the color drain from his face. Every investor. Every reporter. Every executive. Waiting. Then Jonathan finally spoke. His voice cracked. She knew. The room erupted with confusion. Maya remained still. Something inside her told her this was the moment everything changed. Jonathan looked at the monitor as though the words were burning through him. She knew the truth all these years. Richard closed his eyes. Around the ballroom, whispers spread like wildfire. Maya slowly stepped closer. Not because she wanted attention. Because she wanted to understand. The note contained only one sentence. 7 words. 7 words powerful enough to shatter a billionaire. Jonathan's daughter was never lost. She was hidden. The room went silent again. Reporters stopped typing. Investors froze. Even the security teams seemed unable to move. Maya felt goosebumps race across her arms. Then another realization struck her. The Russian voices. The distraction. The penthouse. The woman in white. None of it had been about destroying Jonathan. It had been about forcing him to see something. Jonathan looked toward Richard. The two men stared at each other across a room full of witnesses. Years of friendship. Years of secrets. Years of silence. You knew? Jonathan asked quietly. Richard's shoulders sagged. For the first time all night, he did not defend himself. Did not hide. Did not fight. I tried to tell you. The confession landed like thunder. Gasps swept through the crowd. Jonathan's eyes widened. Richard stepped forward slowly. You would not listen. His voice trembled. After your wife disappeared, after Emily vanished, you stopped hearing anyone. Maya felt every person in the room watching. Nobody cared about the gala anymore. Nobody cared about stock prices. They were watching a life unravel in real time. Jonathan's breathing grew uneven. The confidence that once filled every room he entered was gone. Richard looked older now. Smaller. Human. "I protected them," he said. "Because they were afraid of you." The words hit harder than any accusation. Jonathan flinched visibly. Around the room, investors exchanged stunned looks. The mighty billionaire was no longer the victim of a conspiracy. He was part of the tragedy. Then something unexpected happened. One of the reporters lowered her phone and looked directly at Maya. Then another person did the same. Then another. Slowly, the room's attention shifted. Toward the maid. The woman they had mocked. The woman they had ignored. The woman who heard one conversation in a hallway and refused to stay silent. Jonathan followed their gaze. His eyes found Maya. For a long moment neither spoke. The ballroom seemed to disappear around them. Then Jonathan said the words nobody expected. "You were right." The room froze. A billionaire admitting it publicly. In front of everyone. Maya said nothing. She did not smile. She did not celebrate. She simply stood there. Calm. Steady. The same woman she had been all night. Yet the room saw her differently now. Then the giant monitor suddenly flickered. Once. Twice. Security officers immediately turned. The image changed. A live video feed appeared. The young woman from the photograph stood alone inside a dim parking garage. Concrete pillars stretched into darkness behind her. A black SUV idled nearby. Heat shimmered above the exhaust pipes. She looked directly into the camera. Directly at Jonathan. Tears filled his eyes. The room stopped breathing. And then the young woman opened her mouth and spoke the first words anyone had ever heard from her. "Dad, there is something you still do not know about Mom." The parking garage remained silent for a moment after Emily spoke. The faint rumble of the SUV engine echoed through the concrete structure. Warm exhaust drifted into the cold air. On the giant monitor, her face trembled slightly, but her eyes never left the camera. Back in the ballroom, nobody moved. Hundreds of people stood frozen beneath the chandelier light. Even the reporters had lowered their phones for a moment. Jonathan Sterling stared at the screen. His lips parted, but no words came out. The billionaire who had controlled every conversation all night suddenly looked powerless. Human. Emily took a slow breath. Mom did not disappear. The room seemed to tighten again. Maya watched Jonathan's face carefully. Every muscle had gone rigid. She left, Emily continued softly, because she thought it was the only way to protect me. A wave of confusion spread through the crowd. Investors exchanged glances. Security officers looked toward one another. Richard Hale lowered his head. The guilt he had carried for years was now visible to everyone. Jonathan closed his eyes. Just for a second. Maya could almost feel the weight pressing down on him. The years. The regret. The certainty that had guided his life suddenly crumbling beneath him. Emily's voice remained calm. She never stopped loving you. The words hit harder than any accusation. Jonathan looked away from the screen. His eyes glistened beneath the cold reflection of the ballroom lights. Around him, people who had spent years fearing him were now watching something they had never expected. Vulnerability. Silence filled the room again. Not the silence of tension. The silence of realization. Maya felt dozens of eyes shift toward her. Different eyes now. Softer. Thoughtful. Ashamed. The same executives who had laughed when she spoke. The same guests who had dismissed her. One senior investor slowly lowered his gaze. Another quietly stepped aside as if making space for her. No one announced it. No one discussed it. Yet the room had changed. Jonathan finally looked at Maya. The distance between Billionaire and Maid suddenly felt very small. "You tried to tell me." His voice was rough. Maya held his gaze. "I tried." No anger. No pride. Just truth. That simple answer landed harder than any speech. Several people looked down immediately. The event manager who had mocked her earlier could not even meet her eyes. The security chief shifted uncomfortably. Reporters captured every second. Jonathan inhaled deeply. The sound echoed through the silence. Then, to the shock of everyone watching, he stepped forward. Slowly. Deliberately. Until he stood directly in front of Maya Williams. Hundreds of cameras turned toward them. The room held its breath. Jonathan lowered his head slightly. Not much. Just enough. But everyone saw it. I was wrong. Gasps spread through the ballroom. A billionaire apologizing publicly was rare. A man like Jonathan Sterling doing it was almost unthinkable. Maya remained still. The apology belonged to him now. Not to her. Jonathan continued. You saved me tonight. The words settled across the room like a wave. No one laughed anymore. No one questioned her. No one called her just a maid. The atmosphere transformed completely. Maya could feel it. Not power. Respect. Genuine respect. Yet even as the emotional weight of the moment settled over the ballroom, something remained unfinished. Emily was still on the screen. Still inside that parking garage. Still carrying something she had not said. Maya noticed it first. The hesitation in Emily's eyes. The fear. The sadness. There was more. Much more. Jonathan saw it too. Emily, he said softly. What is it? The young woman looked away for the first time. The SUV engine continued humming behind her. A faint vibration echoed through the concrete pillars. Emily swallowed. Tears filled her eyes. The entire ballroom fell silent again. Every camera remained fixed on the screen. Every breath seemed suspended. Then Emily looked back toward her father. Mom wanted me to tell you one last thing. Jonathan froze. Maya felt the atmosphere shift instantly. Not toward relief. Towards something deeper. Something heavier. Emily's lips trembled. The parking garage lights flickered once overhead. Then she slowly reached into her coat and pulled out a small sealed envelope. Jonathan's face lost all color. Because he recognized the handwriting before she even held it up. The envelope trembled slightly in Emily's hands. Behind her, the parking garage had grown almost silent. The SUV engine that had hummed all night finally shut off. The last vibration faded into the concrete. Back in the ballroom, nobody spoke. The flashing emergency lights were gone now. Only the soft glow of chandeliers remained, reflecting off polished metal and empty champagne glasses that nobody cared about anymore. Jonathan Sterling stared at the envelope as though time itself had slowed. He recognized the handwriting instantly. His wife's handwriting. 1,000 memories crossed his face without a single word being spoken. Emily carefully opened the envelope. The paper inside had been folded for years. The edges were worn. Protected. Carried. Waiting for this moment. The room felt impossibly still. Even the reporters lowered their phones. Emily unfolded the letter and began reading. Her voice was quiet. Steady. Jonathan, if you are hearing this, it means the truth finally found its way to you. Jonathan lowered his head. His eyes closed. Around him, nobody moved. I never left because I stopped loving you. I left because fear had become louder than love. And I could not let Emily grow up inside that fear. A tear slipped down Jonathan's face. He did not wipe it away. The billionaire who once commanded every room now stood completely exposed before hundreds of strangers. Yet nobody looked away. Emily continued. The people around you feared disappointing you. The people who loved you feared losing you. And one day, I realized I feared you would never listen. The words landed softly. Yet they hit harder than anything that had happened all night. Jonathan's shoulders sank. Richard Hale quietly looked toward the floor. Years of silence suddenly made sense. Years of mistakes. Years of pride. Then Emily reached the final lines. Her voice trembled. If you ever find this letter, do not spend your life searching for who is wrong. Spend it becoming the man we always hoped you could be. Silence followed. Deep silence. The kind that settles into a room and changes everyone inside it. Jonathan stared at the screen. Emily stared back. Neither spoke. They did not need to. The distance between them felt smaller now. Not solved. Not erased. But smaller. Then Jonathan whispered, "I am sorry." The words barely carried across the ballroom. Yet everyone heard them. Emily smiled through tears. A small smile. Real. Human. "I know." The connection ended a few moments later. The screen faded to black. No dramatic music. No applause. Just silence. The crowd remained motionless. Then slowly, phones lowered. Conversations never started. Nobody wanted to break the moment. Jonathan stood alone beneath the chandeliers. For the first time in years, he looked lighter. Not because his problems were gone. Because the truth no longer had to hide. Then he turned. His eyes found Maya Williams standing near the edge of the ballroom. The same place she had stood when everyone laughed at her. The same uniform. The same quiet posture. Yet everything had changed. Jonathan crossed the room. His footsteps echoed softly across the marble floor. Hundreds of people watched. He stopped in front of her. For a moment neither spoke. Then Jonathan extended his hand. Not as a billionaire. Not as a boss. As one human being to another. "Thank you, Miss Williams." The title hung in the air. Several guests visibly looked down. They remembered what they had called her earlier. Maya accepted the handshake. Calm. Steady. No triumph. No bitterness. Only dignity. "You are welcome, sir." The morning sun had begun rising beyond the ballroom windows. Golden light spilled across the marble floor, replacing the cold shadows of the night. The chandeliers no longer seemed important. Neither did the wealth. Neither did the status. Jonathan released her hand. Maya turned and began walking toward the service corridor. The same hallway where she had spent years unnoticed. Her shoes clicked softly against the floor. One step. Then another. Nobody stopped her. Nobody laughed. Nobody looked through her anymore. They watched in silence as she disappeared into the warm morning light. And for the first time all night, the most powerful person in the building was not the billionaire standing beneath the chandeliers. It was the woman who had entered as a maid and left with everyone's respect.